Hello, Mike. You asked the question, why do your Solexes idle at 2,200 RPM and what can you do about it? Well, that simple question just allowed you to enter the twilight zone, the Solex carburetor twilight zone, because there are so many reasons why these things will not idle properly. So let's see if we can, before you even start your engine and deal with the carburetors while they're running, you've got to make sure that they are mounted correctly and that you don't have any vacuum leaks. If you've already been running your engine and you want to check for vacuum leaks, best way to do it is with some spray carburetor cleaner or WD-40. What you're going to do is you're going to spray here where the intake manifold meets the cylinder head and where the carburetors bolt up to the intake manifold, and when you spray as the engine idles and you spray your cleaner around here, it'll get sucked. If you have a vacuum leak, the carburetor cleaner gets sucked in there and the idle will change. The same with the throttle shafts. You're just going to spray right like that while the engine is idling. Your most common reasons why these things idle so high is they're worn out and they're processing too much air, too much unmetered air. And so what you're going to do is you're going to spray everywhere the throttle shaft comes through on the carburetors. And if you hear the idle change, then you know you've got a vacuum leak, which is going to affect your ability to adjust the carburetors. Also, physically grab the carburetors and make sure the intake manifold is not loose on the cylinder head. In terms of actual, okay, let's see, next, let's try linkage. All right, another reason these can be idling too high is simply a linkage issue. And so when you get the car warmed up, remember all your adjustments that you're going to do have to be made when the car is warmed up. So you would have the car engine warmed up, disconnect your throttle linkage and make sure that the linkage is not artificially increasing your idle RPM. Of course, at 2200 you're no longer on the idle circuit, you're above that. But linkage is a real issue on these things. So anytime you're adjusting the carburetors, you always have your linkage off. And you also it helps to have the air collector off, so that you can see inside the carburetors, make sure you're getting good, make sure there's no dripping and other issues inside. So what I do is, if your air cleaner is off, air log is off, tie your choke cables, your choke levers together with the twisting, because this is the main return spring on the choke mechanism, and this one just flops around, and this can flop closed unless you have it tied to the other lever. And then you want a return spring at all times. So what you can do is you will have your normal return spring hooked to the carburetors, and you bring it over to the firewall, the fender well, and you have a wire over here that attaches to the what I use is the attaching point for the hood bumper. And you put a wire around that point, and then you string it over to your return spring, so you've got a return spring, and you don't have runaway carburetors when you disconnect the linkage. And you always hold on to this linkage when you're adjusting the carburetors. Now, in terms of actual adjustment, your baseline adjustments are going to be your idle speed and your idle mixture screw. So your idle speed, what you do is back it off until this lever is not being it does not touch the screw right here, and then you're going to run this screw in 1.5 turns. That's your baseline for the idle speed. For the idle mixture screw, your baseline is screw this in until it just touches, and then back it out 1.5 turns. You don't screw it down tight. That's not necessary. All you want to do is screw it down until it touches. In fact, if you want to take it out and examine it, you can check to see if the condition of your taper on your needle is in good shape. Because sometimes people in the past, guerrillas, have screwed these things down as if they're holding together the Brooklyn Bridge, and then they screw them out, and when they screw them down so tight, they deform the hole in the carburetor, and then deform the taper on the needle. And so you can take this out, it won't hurt a thing, and examine your taper on the needle. This idle mixture screw is supposed to be screwed down snug to where it is no longer in service, no longer used at all. And so if this is in good condition and this one's not, swap the needles. But this idle mixture screw is closed off here because the carburetor idles only on the first barrel of each carburetor. And so this is the only screw that you need for adjusting purposes. Now those are the two baseline adjustments that you need. And of course your linkage is adjusted to where when you snap it in place, you don't feel any visible change in the linkage. That's interesting. It snapped on there just a minute ago. What did I do wrong? All right, there we go. So make sure that when you snap your linkage in place, this arm does not, this whole assembly here does not move. So now you got, all right, so that works there. Now then, other possible reasons you're idling too high are adjustments on the carburetor itself that are very fine adjustments and unique to the carburetors. Right down here you've got two little screws, and one of them's a jam screw and the other one is your screw that screws down a screw that impinges on a pin that is connected to the second barrel carburetor. Second barrel of the carburetor. And so what you're supposed to do is this is a follower right here. This is attached to the first barrel, and when you've floored the engine and all four barrels are open, and then you let off on the gas, the first barrel closes, and this pin right here, the screw hits this pin, which then artificially closes the second barrel. And you can see that happening because this counterweight is going to move from, let me adjust this. So you got this open like this, throttles, let's do it over here, you can see it better. So you got you got all four barrels opening, and you let go of the gas, and all this first barrel linkage closes the second barrel. And so what you want to do is make sure that when you have the throttle lever closed, that you have just a smidge of free play. Move this over so that you have just a smidge of free play on this thing. In other words, you don't have any. Let's see this. See this a little bit better here. All right. See a little bit of free play? Because if you don't have any free play, and you have this screw screwed down too tight, you can actually be hitting the pin on the second barrel, and the second barrel would be closed at that point, but you can screw the pin down far enough that you start artificially opening up the first barrel. And so that's why you have to make sure you have some little bit of slop here. So that means that you don't have this first barrel artificially open because of this little screw down here. And that little screw, the clearance is going to change as your idle, as you adjust the idle, and the position of the throttle lever changes. So as this throttle lever changes, its relationship to this pin and screw changes. So once you get everything set up, you got to double check. So you're going back and forth double checking things. Another possibility is, again, wear and slop. And what you're going to do is simply grab a hold of the, sorry about that, grab a hold of the throttle shafts here and just wiggle. See if you got any slop in there. See how much movement there is in there. You should have almost no slop or movement in there. This should not wiggle up and down or wiggle back and forth. And do that with every individual throttle shaft. And so if you've got any slop and movement in there, that's where your leakage is going to be taking place. And it's going to affect your idle dramatically. Let's see. And then once you get the engine going and warmed up, your idle mixture screw is going to be, you're going to adjust your idle for the airflow, and so both carburetors are synchronized in terms of airflow. And what you're going to be using is a synchrometer. And typically when these things are at the proper idle, you should be drawn about between 4 and 6 on the scale right here. And you're going to adjust, once the engine's warmed up, you're going to adjust your idle mixture screw in and out until you get the best running, best idling of the engine. And as you screw it in, the engine will stumble. As you screw it out, the engine will stumble, and you get a midpoint. And then you can, at that point, you can rev the engine and see how it responds, and then you can keep adjusting your idle mixture screw as much as you want to. Let's see, what else? You're going to want to make sure you've got good, while you got the air log off, you're going to check for the accelerator pump in here. Let's see if I can get it on camera. And what you want is a real nice fine needle spray of fuel. There you go, you can see that. And that's what you want to achieve. A real fine needle spray. And you'll adjust that underneath the carburetor here with your accelerator pump diaphragm adjusting screw and jam nut. What else? So basically, the reason these things idle too fast is they're worn out, or the linkage is incorrectly adjusted. I'm trying to think what else. Or they're mounted incorrectly. You've got vacuum leaks. In terms of mounting, make sure that the using factory gaskets right here, these thick rubber gaskets, and you've also got to use a wave washer in here, which acts as a limit stop for the metal sleeve that's inside the inside here holding these things together. If you have that wave washer in there, that metal sleeve digs into the carburetors, and they don't they don't stay tight. I'm trying to think what else is there. Make sure your fuel is properly filtered. Make sure that fuel level is correct. So if you were to have fuel in the carburetors, then all of a sudden take the float ball covers off, there's a separating little wall inside there, and the fuel level should be up to the top of that separating wall. That's the quickest, easiest way to tell if you got the right fuel level. Always use, when you're dealing with fuel lines going to the carburetors, always use 2 wrenches. One to stabilize this fitting here, and the other one to do the turning up here. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you'll rip the threads out. So let's see what else. These adjustments simply adjust your linkage, your levers right here to line up properly with the choke cable coming down. So you can adjust those to where you get good alignment. It's not a big deal. I want to make sure that your choke is working. Darn it, just did my thing right there. Anyway, so get good choke action, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. Probably flooded a little bit, but let's see if we can crank this up and give you an idea what these things are supposed to work like. Yeah, that's how they should start. And that's how they should idle. Now, I'll give you an idea of adjusting. So, disconnect the throttle linkage. And here it adjusts a little bit. That's why there's a turnbuckle back here, so you can dial in the exact linkage length for the carburetor, so that you don't have two carburetors running at different speeds from each other. This is the final linkage that you adjust. So what you're going to do with your unit, your synchrometer, is you're going to check, make sure you don't have any, very minimal flow coming through the second barrel. 2 or less is what you should be reading. See that one right there? Alright, see that one right there? So very minimal flow. But if you have, while you're idling, push on the counterweight right here. Push on this counterweight and see if it changes the idle. Get my fingers out of the way. You can feel it, you can hear it change just a little bit. Alright, well, if it changes yours dramatically, that's another area where you are leaking. That's going to cause high idle. Now we're going to adjust the idle speed. So right here you can see we're running at about 5 over here. Running about 5 because I've already adjusted these obviously. And so what you want to do is, if you want your idle speed to go up, right now we're idling probably about 700, 500 to 700. So if you want your idle to go up, you crank this, say, a 1/4 turn. This one a 1/4 turn, and read your numbers. So we're up to 5.5, 6. Up to 5.5, 6. Because obviously the thread pitch on each of these is the same, so the same effect on each carburetor. Alright, so we dial this back down. Because with new carburetors you can get a real nice low idle just for fun. There's about 5. About 5. Now we're going to do the idle mixture screw. Get this in position. Can you see the idle mixture screw? Okay, right there. All right. Now then. So we're going to screw this in. You can hear the engine falter, and then you screw it back out, and you hear the engine falter. Oh, almost died. Now back it out. Get the engine pick up. Screw it back out. Start to falter again. You also can hear too much air being processed through here. Screw it back in. Now we want to just very slowly get it to where it sounds like it's running the best. Get your best idle. And this is tedious work, you just have to listen for it. Alright, snap our linkage on, make sure that nothing changes in terms of the idle. Alright, now we're going to rev it and see if we don't, how it revs, and make sure we don't have any backfires. If it's backfiring, it's a lean condition, we need to open this up a little bit. And you can go back and check your numbers. And if you need to make any other adjustments, you do them at that time. You see the idle change because I don't have this adjusted properly. So, fun with multiple carburetors and multiple linkages. There we go. That's about as much as I can impart at this time. Hope that helps you a little bit.